Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, Ordinance 24-0521, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee, joined by Odette Ramos, 14th District. Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee to my immediate right. We're joined by representatives from the Mayor's office and President's office. We're here for Department of Legislative Reference. Ben Guthorn, Mr. Gunthorn, if you could, Guthorn, sorry, it's a little early. If you could please take it away with your presentation, keep it to 5 minutes, and if you could also discuss your staffing needs, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee and everybody else for being here this morning. For the record, my name is Ben Guthorn. I'm the Director of the Department of Legislative Reference. And we'll just get right into it. So in brief, just to describe the mission of our department, we're probably best known for our support of the City Council in terms of researching and drafting legislation. However, we also are in charge of administering the city's records management program as well as overseeing the city archives. And there's additional nuance and detail in there, but for the sake of brevity, I'll leave it at that. For the fiscal year 2025 goals, the biggest goal that we have for the legislative reference, which is Service 106, is the launching of a new digital law library for the publishing and consumption of the city code, regulations, charter, ultimately the administrative manual, and in addition to that, the city council rules. That is expected to launch in its first part, which will include the city code by the end of July of this year. So the first month of fiscal 25. The second main goal is for Service 107, which is Archives and Records Management, which is to develop, publish, and implement revised records management policies. This department, over the course of its history, has been responsible for records management within the city of Baltimore. Unfortunately, over the past several decades, this duty has not been taken necessarily as seriously as it need be, and I find it's imperative that we grab the bull by the horns and move forward with a renewed sense of urgency for assisting agencies and other offices, make sure that they understand what records management is, understand the import not only to the day-to-day operations of the city, but also, and somewhat most importantly, the legacy that they leave as servants here in the city of Baltimore and how we can preserve that history for future generations. Legislative reference is made of 2 services, Service 106, which is Legislative Reference Services. You all here at the council are most familiar with our services for the researching and drafting of legislation. And then Service 107 is Archives and Records Management, which is headquartered at 2615 Matthews Street, which is the City Archives and Records Management Center. I hopefully can get everybody over there to take a tour. It's quite a sight to be seen. The resources and the immense amount of history there is truly tremendous. So going into Service 106, again, we're familiar with this service. Our performance measures were set back when performance budgeting or outcome budgeting was started with BBMR. And since that time have not necessarily been updated, and I don't necessarily believe that they accurately reflect either the work of the department, the import of the work that we do, or necessarily the impact that we have. It's a goal over the next fiscal year to adjust these, work with OPI, and improve the types of measures that we are following, and so we can have a not necessarily more interesting, but a more impactful story to tell next year when we're before you. With that said, I do want to draw your attention to the fiscal 23 performance. It is certainly below our goals, and I don't want to leave it unsaid. For the percent of legislative drafting that was completed on time, a lot of our performance issues within the past fiscal year and even beyond that have been due to staffing issues. I myself served as acting director of the department for close to 20 months, which meant that we had not 1, but 2 pins that were unable to be filled because I was occupying both of those. And that had a real impact on service to this body, as well as service to other members in our community. And also reflects our performance in terms of ensuring that the code online was updated within the metric of 2 days from the notification. It's not a reasonable timetable for the updating of the code, and our percentage of performance reflects not only the necessary lack of reality within that measure, but also our inability to meet that measure. And we hope to do better in the future with the implementation of the new publishing of the code. It will be, I won't say necessarily instantaneous, but it'll be the same week that a bill will be signed by the mayor, will go into effect, and it'll be updated and available online for members of the public and of this body to review. Service 107, Archives and Records Management. This service doesn't get a lot of camera time, but it does incredibly important work. And I'm very proud of the individuals that we have working in this service. In addition, I do want to highlight the fact that this service is supplemented by the state of Maryland through an intergovernmental agreement with the Maryland State Archives. Our city archivist and our deputy city archivist are state employees that act as agents of the city in their work in terms of preserving, protecting, and ensuring access to our historical materials. The measures for this service are patrons using the archives and the number of records accessible online. Again, I hope to improve the way that we measure these items in the future. Currently, number of patrons and number of records accessible online are numbers that are tracked by the Maryland State Archives. And their way of measuring patrons does not discriminate against necessarily unique clicks onto a website or to social media or things to that extent. So that number, I don't know if it's necessarily inflated, but it needs to be further refined to better reflect just how effective we are being within the city and how much of an impact we're having on an annual basis. Additionally, the number of records accessible online, the state of Maryland, where our long-term permanent records are stored online, is in the process of totally updating a system that was built in-house back in the 90s, and we're hoping to see some improvements there as well. And Mr. Chair, you asked me to address general staffing needs for the department because, as I think everybody here today understands, our department has been not only short-staffed, but I believe understaffed for a number of years and even decades. And so for a brief piece of history, I just want to point out that the highest level of staffing that our department had, I went back as 1985 in terms of analysis. Fiscal year 85 and fiscal year 90 reflected 12 members within the Department of Legislative Reference, 7 within Service 106, 5 within Service 107. As of 2015, that number had been cut in half to 6, with 5 members within Service 106 and 1 member within Service 107. As of fiscal 24, we are still at 5 members within Legislative Reference Services, and we've been able to increase from 1 member to 2 members within Service 107 just within the last fiscal year, which has been a tremendous improvement. They joined the service not quite 6 weeks ago, and they've already been a tremendous help. You know, certainly staffing numbers over fiscal years, it's hard to evaluate the effectiveness, what processes have gone from paper to digital, what efficiencies have been accomplished through that transition. But it's also hard to measure what additional services are being provided by the department, increased workloads, other responsibilities over time. And rather than trying to walk through the numbers, which I have been through, I have put together an ideal staffing level. And it is ambitious, and I don't necessarily expect it all to happen right now. But I do want to provide one anecdote. The city did not have an administrative procedure manual, or Administrative Procedure Act, excuse me, until 2020. With that work, it was only expected that 1/4 of 1 full-time employee would be necessary to administer the entirety of that program. It was a woeful miscalculation. The number of individuals that are required to actually provide the right type of service to our agencies and to ensure that members of the public are able to access interpret, understand, and put our regulations to use so they can do business within this city without too much friction, is at least 3 full-time employees. So that would be a net increase of 2 within that, just alone. And just to demonstrate how the short staffing and the additional service required by the Administrative Procedure Act has affected us, our service previously employed 3 legislative services analysts to cover the entirety of the work of the council. That went from 3 of us to doing the work of the council. I took on the role of acting director. That left 2. And then we have the APA taking away 1 of those people. So over the past 20 to 24 months, you effectively have only had 1 full-time legislative services analyst doing the work of this council. And I've been helping as much as possible, but I think we all know that that has not been sufficient. And so with that said, the addition of 2 more employees to that particular working group is necessary. We are looking for an operations specialist to assist with the administrative workload of the team, because across all of us, we all wear any number of hats, which is very familiar within the city. And shifting over to records management, I know I said that we used to have 1, now we have 2, which is obviously a tremendous thing, but it still isn't enough. We're looking to revitalize our records management work, provide guidance, policies to agencies and offices with regard to digital materials, how for those to be stored, and ultimately how they can be accessed by the public, with an addition of 2 more employees within that service for a total of 7 additional positions. I ran the numbers just based on median salary per grade. I'm happy to get into that, but I do think that I'm laboring the point just a bit much for the number of people here this morning. So with that, I'll say we need help, and we're happy to discuss offline how that can be accomplished and how we can continue to serve this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. You're doing an outstanding job. Appreciate all the support from you and your team and the excellent responsiveness. Really do appreciate it. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also echo my, Mr. Chair, I think you and your team have done a great job for what you can do. And I know I will take responsibility for keeping you all very busy as well. Can we get that as a committee request, your recommendations for fully staffing your office and the salaries that you're looking for? I think that the records management and historical documentation is extremely important. I'm very proud to have the archives in my district. I think that the work of the council is extremely important, and having more staff to support us will just make our jobs better, and we would also increase efficiency of the council. So if you could supply that for us, that would be super, and I'm happy to work through what those scenarios look like with finance and the mayor's office to figure out how to get that capacity that you need.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. So I'll put that in writing, but it's basically the request is to have the director's outline of fully staffing his office.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Ben, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.